A few months ago, I was in Zurich, sitting in this, high-end cafe, and I'm listening to this senior AI ethics advisor from a major European think tank.
Okay.
He's leaning forward, and he's got this kind of academic fervor, explaining why algorithmic justice and inclusive data sets are the only real metrics for progress.
Right, the seminar room argument.
Exactly. He was so proud, as if the sheer moral weight of his words could somehow steer global technology. To him, the AI race was just a debate to be won.
But there's always a but.
There is. A quiet man sitting with us, an investor just back from a site visit to a GPU facility in Suzhou. He interrupts.
And not with another theory, I'm guessing.
Not at all. He just pulls out his phone, shows us these grainy, totally unremarkable photos of factory floors.
No slogans, no protests.
Just thousands of shimmering, domestically made GPU units being created for shipment, and a document from a national IP office listing 18 specific industrial battlegrounds where these chips were headed.
Wow. The physical reality check.
The advisor was just floored. He looked almost offended. He started to say something about regulatory compliance, but the investor just shrugged.
What did he say?
He said, while we're arguing about the soul of the machine, they've already finished building its skeleton.
That's a powerful image. It really is.
And that moment, that cold realization that one side is playing a game of words while the other is playing a game of physical reality, that's the defining split of 2025.
The civilizational hard fork, as you put it.
We're watching companies like Zippo AI and Minimax heading for massive IPOs. Domestic chip makers like Muxi are in mass production. This isn't just a business cycle.
No, it's structural.
It is. While the West drifts into what some are calling a Vitocracy, where every innovation gets strangled by 1,000 legal and political no's, the East is just doubling down on a relentless technocracy.
Which leads to the uncomfortable question.
Does the future, in the era of AGI, belong to the civilization that talks the best, or the one that builds the fastest?
That framing is incredible because it cuts right through the noise. It moves the whole discussion away from these abstract debates and anchors it right in the physical world of state capacity, of deployment speed.
So that's our mission for this deep dive.
Exactly. To really dissect this hard fork, we need to look at it across, I think, 3 critical dimensions.
Okay.
First, the political structure that either enables or, paralyzes action. Second, the actual physical infrastructure, the skeleton for AGI. And finally, how the intellectual elite who drive the research are being formed.
Right. So the question for you, the listener, is whether all this institutional friction, the endless consultation, the cost of the Western system, can possibly compete with the speed of a focused technocracy.
It's talk versus speed, and the stakes are, they're everything.
We have to look beyond the innovation rhetoric, the buzzwords.
We have to look at the structural mechanics that either accelerate or just seize up technological progress.
Okay, so let's start where all that friction begins. The political hard fork. And that means we have to grapple with Francis Fukuyama's term, Vitocracy.
It's a really critical concept. He developed it to diagnose the dysfunction you see in these very mature, very regulated democracies.
And what does it mean exactly?
A Vitocracy is a system where so many different players, entities, entrenched interests, you name it, have the power to veto or slow down or just block reforms.
So many people can say no.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the result is that the entire institutional machine it seizes up. It achieves this kind of rigidity and paralysis. It's designed to stop bad things from happening, but the collateral damage is it also stops good, necessary things from happening.
And the material we're looking at points out that this isn't just a political disagreement. It's almost baked into the operating system of Western governance, especially in the U.S.
Oh, for sure. The U.S. government is often described as a state of courts and parties.
Which suggests it prefers legal fights and partisan gridlock over just smooth, efficient administration.
Precisely. The whole system is built on these excessive checks and balances. And look, they were designed to protect liberties and prevent tyranny, but they come with a quantifiable cost in today's tech environment.
You're talking about this idea of judicialization.
Exactly. When every policy dispute immediately ends up in court, it just creates this environment of, uncertainty, procedural complexity, redundancy, lack of finality, and high transaction costs.
Those are the penalties you pay for this kind of system.
They're the silent killer of the state's ability to build anything quickly.
Okay, let me push back on that for a second. Isn't that cost, that complexity, the right to say no, isn't that just the price of liberty? We deliberately avoid that kind of authoritarian speed because we have these safeguards, even if they slow us down.
And that's the core debate, isn't it? But what the sources we're examining force us to do is focus on the economic and strategic consequences of that choice. And the material suggests that cost has become, well, almost existential.
You mean we can actually measure the paralysis?
Oh yeah, look at the legislative process. The data is just stark. The success rate of federal legislation in the U.S. used to be around 7%.
Meaning 7% of bills introduced actually pass.
Right. In the modern, highly polarized era, that number has dropped to just 2%. The system isn't just slowing down, it's seizing up.
A drop of more than 2/3, that suggests a system that just wasn't designed for this level of political friction.
And even when something complex and necessary does manage to limp across the finish line, what does it look like?
A monster.
A monster, exactly. Think about the Affordable Care Act or Dodd-Frank. These bills became labyrinthine, not because the policy itself was that complicated, but because they were weighed down with hundreds of concessions and carve-outs and, well, side payments to special interests.
You mean they had to buy off all the people with veto power?
You got it.
Yeah.
They had to be bought off to stop them from killing the whole thing. And the result is policy so dense and contradictory that it's nearly impossible to implement effectively.
So Western governance isn't just slow. It's actively producing these high-friction mandates that guarantee slow deployment for everything, including any kind of AI strategy.
Precisely. Now let's look across the hard fork, the technocratic counterpoint, which prioritizes governance capacity and, above all, efficiency.
This is where Fukuyama's observation about state capacity comes in.
Yes. He noted that countries with strong central states, especially places like China with long histories of it, they developed that robust state structure before they democratized.
And that sequence gives them a huge advantage for rapid development.
A massive advantage, especially for these huge, large-scale engineering projects. It's a kind of muscle memory.
Which brings us back to that coordinator in Suzhou, Chen.
The story of Chen is the perfect micro-example of this macro difference. He was a municipal coordinator, and his task was to integrate the state's AI goals into the city's infrastructure. And the mandate was simple: efficiency and speed.
Just think about how different that is operationally.
Right.
His counterparts in Europe or North America might spend 3 years in public consultations, environmental reviews, political fights, just to get smart streetlights approved.
Meanwhile, Chen's team had a direct line from macro policy right to deployment. They were focused on a centralized command center, using domestic AGI to optimize energy use for hundreds of industrial facilities at once.
The machine doesn't care about the debate, it just cares about the output.
Exactly. But that speed,
Yeah.
it does raise the question you brought up earlier. What about the long-term sustainability? Does skipping all those checks and balances create blind spots that bite you later on?
It's a huge risk, for sure. But the analysis suggests the immediate goal isn't profit. It's about achieving strategic technological dominance. And that speed is maintained by a really clear focus, formalized in what they call the 18 industrial battlegrounds.
This is such a critical point. It's what separates this approach from, some abstract Western innovation strategy. The National IP Office didn't list vague goals like improving citizen welfare.
No, they listed 18 specific industrial battlegrounds, or AI plus key application scenarios.
And crucially, these aren't just academic ideas. They're described as physical boundaries and efficiency channels.
So their function is to skip the abstract debate and just translate the big AI narrative directly into physical engineering projects.
Right, aimed squarely at the real economy. We can see this in a couple of key examples. One of the battlegrounds is advanced manufacturing supply chain optimization.
Which means using AI to predict machine failures, automate quality control with high-speed cameras, and reroute logistics on the fly. It's embedding AI directly onto the factory floor.
It's physical control. It's not just processing data. It's controlling robots and the flow of materials.
And another one is complex biomedicine and drug discovery.
Yeah, this involves just massive computational power, a lot of it on those new domestic GPUs, to analyze protein folding, speed up molecular simulations, and sort through clinical trial data.
Things with direct, tangible benefits for the economy and for national security.
The logic is just relentless and practical. You pair the most advanced tools AI with the most urgent, real-world problems. This focus stops resources from being wasted on well, on the silly use cases we see so much of in the Western AI hype cycle.
They're not building an AI to write corporate poetry.
They're building an AI to run a factory or discover a new drug.
And this is what the sources are calling the digital awakening. It's the Chinese civilization state using its state capacity, its history of focusing on order, to turn these mandates into physical reality, and fast.
It's that organizational muscle memory again, the same way they built thousands of kilometers of high-speed rail, but now they're applying it to digital infrastructure. It's the infrastructure that matters.
Which leads us perfectly into the second part of this hard fork, the infrastructure battleground. Because, at the end of the day, no amount of brilliant software matters if you can't build the stuff it runs on.
That's the core thesis. Power isn't in the cloud. It's in the ability to manufacture the doot the cloud is built on.
And the strategic shift China's undertaken here is, it's just remarkable. They are actively pivoting away from that ailing property sector.
Little de-property process.
Right, which fueled decades of speculative growth. And they're moving towards three core tangible areas: tech and innovation, advanced manufacturing, and modern infrastructure. It's a massive, centrally directed refocus on the real economy.
And modern infrastructure here is the key. It's the digital nervous system. It means 5G, cloud facilities, data centers, and critically, the ability to make your own chips.
This strategic necessity is what's driving these industrial breakthroughs.
And the biggest one noted in the material is the mass production and the IPOs of these domestic GPU giants, Muxi, Beren, Tianshu, Zixin. This isn't just about playing catch-up.
No, it's about foundational resilience.
We really have to see this domestic GPU production as the high-speed rail construction of our time. It's a strategic move to make sure that the civilization's brain, the AI models, and its nervous system, the compute power, are rooted in its own industrial body.
Because depending on foreign suppliers for something, that fundamental is just seen as an unacceptable vulnerability, especially now.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that decision is driven by a deep cultural commitment to engineering, to manufacturing. We see this so clearly in the story of the engineer, Liang.
Right, the engineer who came back from Silicon Valley.
Yes. He left a lucrative software job to go work at Muxi. And his perspective says it all. For him, the real value, the dignity of the physical, was in building the actual silicon wafers.
He saw his time in the West as just optimizing ad clicks for speculative financial games.
While the real hard work of building the digital foundation was happening somewhere else, it's that contrast between optimizing a line of code for a tiny revenue bump versus mastering the incredibly complex process of fabricating millions of transistors on a piece of silicon.
And the sources frame these domestic chips as a kind of strategic defense against deindustrialization.
It's a physical guarantee that your core industrial capacity isn't going to just wither away. And it's a direct counterpoint to what the sources call the West's financial idle speed,
where GDP can be pushed higher by things that aren't actually productive, like derivatives trading or lawyer fees.
Exactly. Financial capital has become totally attached from the slow, heavy, often messy business of making complex things.
Which creates a fatal dependency.
It's a structural misalignment. Financial capital wants short-term liquidity, a fast return. But building a semiconductor fab, that's heavy industrial innovation. It requires patient capital, sometimes over a decade before you see a profit.
And that timeline just doesn't work for the modern Western financial system.
So the capital floods into quick return software platforms, while the engineering will, the social capacity, the workforce, the expertise to make the advanced silicon, it just atrophies.
Leaving the West dependent on others for that fundamental physical skeleton.
And this industrial pivot is changing everything, even the perception of global product quality. That old made in China label, the one associated with low-cost disposable stuff.
Which was probably an unfair stereotype even back then.
Arguably, yes. But that perception is now rapidly shifting to high-end strategic applications. We're talking about a move from cheap electronics to advanced AI accelerators and cutting-edge semiconductors.
So it's challenging this whole assumption that strategic capability has to be tied to the West or, other established Asian powers.
They're achieving scale and complexity at the same time. And the scale itself is what's driving the quality up and the costs down.
Okay, so if the political system gives you speed and the industrial base gives you the physical skeleton, then the intellectual output is the brain trust.
Right. And this brings us to the third dimension of this hard fork. Quantifying the intellectual shift with academic data.
This is a really important metric.
It's critical. We're looking at global AI publications, journal articles, conference papers, and we're using a specific measurement called fractional counting.
Okay, so why is fractional counting the metric that matters here, not just a simple count?
Because it's the clearest leading indicator we have. It standardizes credit when researchers from different countries collaborate. If a paper has 5 authors from 5 countries, a simple count gives each country 1 full credit.
Which inflates the numbers.
Massively. Fractional counting gives each of those countries 0.2 credit. It's a much more accurate picture of where the foundational intellectual property is actually coming from.
And when we apply that metric and look at the U.S., the trend is, well, it's not good.
It's unambiguously negative. In the year 2000, the U.S. was responsible for 27.56% of global AI publications.
A dominant position.
Totally. By the 2025 projections, that share plummets to just 12.01%. They've lost more than half their share of global knowledge production in this field.
And what about Europe?
The EU 27 bloc shows an even steeper, more consistent decline. They dropped from almost 30% down to 12.40% in the same period.
So that institutional fragmentation and different national research agendas, it's not working. They can't form a cohesive counterweight.
It seems not.
Yeah.
But the truly epical shift here is China's ascendancy. In 2000, they had a very modest share, just 4.90%. They were basically a developing player in AI research.
Not now.
Fast forward to the 2025 projection, and that figure is nearly 36%. They've gone from being a minor contributor to the single, undisputed, dominant global player in foundational AI knowledge.
And the volume is just staggering.
The data shows that by 2025, China will be contributing 3 times as many AI publications as the U.S.
3 to 1.
For every 1 paper from the U.S., there are 3 from China. That ratio just indicates a massive acceleration of intellectual throughput.
And if you aggregate the data,
it's even more dominant. China's nearly 36% share is getting close to parity with the combined share of all the other major players, the US, EU27, UK, Canada, Japan, Korea, and India.
Wait, all of them combined?
All of them combined, which totals 45.64%. We're talking about one nation generating almost as much foundational knowledge as the rest of the consolidated research world put together.
And it's important to say this isn't just a US-China story.
No, absolutely not. The decline of the West is happening inside a broader, multipolar Asian shift. Look at India. They've grown substantially from about 1% to nearly 10% by 2025. There's a whole new Asian research ecosystem emerging.
The strategic implications here are pretty clear.
They're undeniable. Volume translates directly into advantage. When a disproportionate share of new foundational AI knowledge is coming from Chinese institutions, they get an immediate edge in setting technical standards, defining new approaches, and aligning their intellectual output with their industrial skeleton.
Which brings us to the final piece of this puzzle. The elite structures that are actually generating all this intellectual surplus, the whole system seems to be based on this relentless meritocratic engine.
We see a very clear pattern of elite selection. The founding teams of these big AI unicorns like Zippo and Minimax, they are overwhelmingly drawn from the absolute top-tier technical universities like Tsinghua.
And this isn't just networking.
No, it's a direct result of a brutally competitive and meritocratic screening system that's designed to find and mobilize the most capable technical minds.
I came across this profile of a PhD student, Wei, who really seemed to represent the product of the system.
What was his story?
His life was just governed by what the source called the cold, hard logic of STEM. He existed in a world where performance was judged strictly by results knowledge, computational skill, measured IQ. There were 0 points for anything like social signaling.
That single-minded focus on technical mastery, it creates a very specific culture. It's rooted in this belief that mathematics will not lie and physical laws have no prejudice.
It's an environment that sees success purely through the lens of objective technical achievement.
And that hyper-competitive, results-only screening process is what produces this massive intellectual surplus that's aimed directly at mastering AGI neural architecture.
While in the West, we're often debating the need for a well-rounded graduate. The system prioritizes that narrow, deep technical mastery you need for exponential breakthroughs.
And this is where the institutional split becomes so sharp. We're seeing reports that while this rigorous approach is creating these hyper-focused technical elites, parts of the Western university system are under significant strain.
What kind of strain?
The argument being made is that internal disputes, often focused on evolving institutional criteria, risk-eroding academic standards, and shifting the focus away from pure scientific mastery toward other metrics, like identity-based ones.
Which is the core of that civilization mockery we started with.
Exactly. While the West is tied up in debates about who gets to speak and what ethical rules should govern some future machine, the East is completely focused on learning how to build that future.
Recognizing that the real competition is in the hard power of the mind.
It creates this almost total lack of institutional friction on the Eastern side when it comes to tech development. Resources, intellectual capital, and state mandates all align to accelerate AGI. Meanwhile, the Western system's procedural hurdles act as a massive drag, intellectually and financially.
Okay, so despite all this evidence of Eastern acceleration and Western friction, we have to talk about a critical counter-narrative, the one coming from inside the Western data science community itself.
The stagnation thesis.
Yes. Is Western AI really accelerating, or are we just stuck in a hype cycle?
This narrative argues that the industry is deep in the grip of Amara's law,
which says we overestimate the short-term impact of a technology,
while underestimating the long-term changes. And right now, the hype around LLMs far, far exceeds the rate of actual foundational progress.
The main technical issue is the scaling bottleneck, right?
That's the core of it. To get linear quality improvements in these large language models, say a 15% better score on a benchmark, you have to scale the parameters exponentially. The jump from GPT-3 to GPT-4 is a classic example. Training costs went up 6 or 7 times for a relatively small gain.
That exponential cost for a linear return? That sounds unsustainable.
It suggests we're hitting hard physical and mathematical limits with the current transformer architecture. The low-hanging fruit of just scaling up is gone. And this cost structure means that only entities with basically unlimited capital, Google, OpenAI, Microsoft, can even play the game.
Which leads to a huge centralization of control.
It's a critical structural problem. The power isn't in decentralized breakthroughs anymore. It's in owning the entire infrastructure stack. If you don't have tens of thousands of GPUs, you're not training a foundational model. You're just paying rent to use someone else's API.
And this creates an illusion of widespread acceleration.
When in reality, the field has been narrowed down to maybe 3 or 4 huge centralized players. And, this encourages the view that LLMs are fundamentally pretty limited tools.
The glorified chatbots or fancy autofill argument?
Right. Systems that are totally bound by their training data. They're often just stochastic parrots, not agents capable of real abstract thought.
And this illusion of intelligence leads to some really expensive and comical misapplications in the corporate world.
Oh, the silly use cases are everywhere. Companies deploying these massive, expensive LLMs to solve problems that a simple spreadsheet could handle.
You hear stories about corporate deployment failures all the time.
Right, like the recruiting AI that just automatically rejected all the applicants for weeks until some engineer finally figured it out. Or the firm that spent millions on a custom LLM to optimize their pricing plans, only to have it hallucinate critical regulatory details and collapse the whole project.
The hype has befuddled the non-technical folks, as the source material puts it,
leading them to trust the systems blindly and just waste huge amounts of capital. The ultimate critique from engineers is aimed at management.
What's the argument?
That CEOs, caught up in the hype, would rather spend $1 billion on a huge pile of chips, a tangible asset for the balance sheet, than hire the expensive engineers needed to figure out algorithmic efficiency, which is seen as an intangible liability.
So you're just throwing money and hardware at the problem instead of thinking smarter.
Exactly. Why optimize your code or explore more efficient architectures when you can just throw more compute at it? It's financial short-termism subsidizing computational inefficiency.
But we have to be balanced here. It's not all stagnation. The material also points to some critical counter-progress, both in the West and globally, that complicates that simple story of decay.
Absolutely. The DeepSeek models, for example, they prove that you can get highly efficient, high-performing models without the unlimited budget of a tech giant.
So the scaling bottleneck isn't an absolute wall.
It's not. In inference, how fast a model responds to you is becoming blazing fast in new models like Gemini Flash. The deployment side is still moving incredibly quickly.
And maybe most important, the work in other AI fields outside the LLM hype bubble is still moving forward.
Oh, robustly. Think about breakthroughs in protein folding like AlphaFold, a huge leap for biomedicine. Or the steady, crucial progress in computer vision, LiDAR, and radar that are essential for the next generation of robotics and autonomous systems.
So the LLM market might be consolidating and hitting diminishing returns.
But the broader field of applied AI, especially where it touches the physical world, is still advancing steadily. It's risky to define the entire AI race by just its loudest segment.
So if we pull all this together, the political paralysis in the West, the Eastern pivot to physical infrastructure, the intellectual shift, the internal critiques of AI's cost structure, what is the one central defining difference between these two approaches?
It all comes down to a single concept: transaction costs. That is a core structural distinction.
And I unpack that.
The West's commitment to internal checks and balances, the very price of its political system, creates these immense, often crippling transaction costs for innovation.
So transaction costs are the time, money, political energy wasted fighting internal battles, navigating red tape.
And seeking consensus, exactly. Every single step, from funding a project to building a factory, means navigating this high-friction maze. Your capital and your brainpower just hit this massive institutional wall.
And the technocratic model is designed to systematically remove those friction points.
Its centralized nature lets capital and state mandates translate directly and quickly into physical reality. Mass-produced GPUs, deployed industrial AI, massive research output. It's a low-friction approach where state capacity ensures alignment, not endless debate.
So it's the difference between a system designed to prevent error, which is inherently slow,
and a system designed for maximum speed, which accepts the risks that come with that speed.
So we come full circle, back to that cafe in Zurich. The evidence we've just unpacked shows this clear, accelerating flow toward physical reality.
The historical current really does seem to favor the efficient, cohesive, and deeply practical approach.
The one that simply builds the fastest.
Or the one that's currently mired in institutional decay, financial short-termism, and this endless high-friction debate.
The whole focus for winning the AGI race has fundamentally shifted. It's not about perfecting the soul of the machine through these long, consensus-driven ethical debates anymore.
No. The contest is now defined by the sheer urgency of completing its powerful industrial skeleton.